The fans love it.
But use it the right way.
Go ahead and go right at it, Tommy.
A little shrug of the shoulders.
Greg Norman warned us about Rory McIlroy, and now it looks like he knew. For years, Rory stood as one of golf's most respected voices. He was loyal. He was brave. He spoke up for the PGA Tour when other players left for LIV Golf and its Saudi money. Fans loved him for it. He looked like the hero defending tradition against a rich outsider trying to buy the sport. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. In June 2023, the PGA Tour secretly worked out a deal with the same Saudi money behind LIV. Rory was kept mostly in the dark. He learned about it only hours before the rest of the world did. After months of defending the tour in public, Rory admitted he felt like a sacrificial lamb. That single sentence changed how people saw the whole fight. It made many fans ask a hard question. What if Greg Norman saw this coming the whole time? Before we go deeper, give this video some hype if you think golf's biggest fight was never as simple as fans were told. To understand why Norman's warning mattered, we have to go back to the start. Norman was easy to dismiss. He was loud, he was combative, he had his own grudges against the PGA Tour going back decades. Many golf fans rolled their eyes whenever he spoke, but his warning was never only about LIV Golf. His real warning was about Rory. Norman believed Rory was letting himself become the public face of a corporate war that was not really his to fight. In the spring of 2022, Norman told a reporter that Rory had been brainwashed by the PGA Tour. Rory was furious. He said he would make it his personal mission to be a pain in Norman's backside. From that point on, the feud was personal and it was loud. Rory did not back down. He used his own wins to send a message. When he won his 21st PGA Tour title, he pointed out it was one more win than Norman's career total. He also brought up Norman's old record of weeks spent as the world's best player, just to needle him. Norman fired back in interviews, calling Rory hypocritical. Late in 2022, Rory and Tiger Woods both said Norman needed to step aside from LIV before any peace deal could happen. Rory said the sport needed an adult in the room. Norman shrugged it off and kept his job. While all of this noise was happening, Rory was slowly turning into something bigger than just a golfer. He became the tour's unofficial spokesperson. He answered tough questions in press conferences that should have gone to tour executives. He criticized friends who left for LIV. He lost some of the warmth he once had with old teammates from Europe. He believed he was protecting history and loyalty. He thought the tour valued that sacrifice as much as he did. But the tour was thinking about something else entirely. It was thinking about survival, leverage, and money. That difference in priorities is exactly what Norman had tried to warn him about. In February 2023, Norman told Rory to watch what he says and mind his mouth. Norman said Rory did not fully understand how LIV's business actually worked, and that he would eventually face embarrassing questions because of it. At the time, it sounded like just another insult in a bitter feud. Only a few months later, it would look like a prophecy. Norman's bigger point was about money and power, not just personal pride. He argued that the PGA Tour could not simply outlast LIV's deep pockets forever. LIV had already forced bigger prize money across the sport. The tour created new events with huge purses to compete, and it built a program that paid top stars extra money just for their popularity. Some of the tour's biggest events roughly doubled their prize money compared to what they paid before LIV showed up. The tour also started copying LIV's format, with smaller fields and no cut for the weekend. Something it had once criticized as bad for the sport. In other words, the business Rory was fighting so hard to protect was already changing into something closer to what Norman had built. Norman also pointed to an awkward truth about freedom and fairness. He reminded everyone that Rory himself had once left the European Tour to go play on the richer PGA Tour, simply chasing better money and bigger opportunities. Norman argued that LIV players were doing the exact same thing Rory had done earlier in his own career. Yet the PGA Tour threatened bans and suspensions against anyone who left for LIV. Norman said those threats were not really about protecting fair competition. They were about protecting the tour's control over its players and its market. When the tour eventually sat down with Saudi money anyway, that argument about protecting fairness became much harder to defend. Then came the moment everything had been building toward. In June 2023, the secret framework deal with Saudi Arabia's PIF became public. Rory had spent more than a year as the loudest voice against LIV. He had sacrificed friendships and taken on pressure that belonged to people running the business side of the sport. Now the business side had quietly made its own peace with the very money he had fought against. Rory was left standing in front of cameras, trying to explain a decision he barely had time to process himself. His admission that he felt like a sacrificial lamb was not just a sad quote. It was the moment Norman's warning became almost impossible to argue against. In the months that followed, Rory's position kept shifting. By January 2024, he admitted he had been too judgmental toward players who had left for LIV. Norman publicly thanked Rory for, in his words, falling on his sword. It was a strange kind of closure between two men who had spent years trading insults. A few months later, Rory drew a clever new line. He said there was a real disconnect between the Saudi investors behind PIF and the people actually running LIV day to day, naming Norman directly as someone who had done those investors a disservice. This let Rory criticize Norman, while still welcoming the same Saudi money he had once called dangerous. It was a smart move, but it also showed just how far his original position had traveled. By 2025, Norman was no longer running LIV at all. A more traditional sports executive named Scott O'Neill took over instead. Rory actually praised the change, saying Norman had been one of the only people who could have gotten LIV off the ground in the first place, but that the league now needed a calmer kind of leadership to grow. It was a respectful comment, but it also confirmed something Norman had said for years. Disruptors are useful for breaking old systems. They are rarely the ones trusted to run the new system once it settles down. Norman never let the subject drop either. In early 2026, he pushed back hard against the players who had benefited the most from the fight he started. He asked Tiger Woods how much he had made from that new popularity bonus program, and asked Rory how much his own prize money had grown over the last couple of years. His point was simple. Every extra dollar they were now earning existed only because he had forced the PGA Tour to change in the first place. It was a blunt way to make the point, but it lined up with everything he had been saying since the start of the fight. None of this means Norman gets to play the hero. He was combative. He held on to old grudges from his own playing days. He picked fights and enjoyed needling people in public. But the parts of his warning about money, leverage, and institutional control kept turning out to be accurate, even if his delivery was rough. There is one more strange thread tying these two men together. Decades before any of this began, Norman faced brutal heckling from a New York crowd at a major championship and had to fight through it just to stay focused. Years later, Rory faced almost the same kind of hostile New York crowd at a Ryder Cup, needing a police escort and reacting directly to fans who would not let up. Two proud vocal competitors, separated by decades, living through nearly identical trials. Maybe that is part of why their feud burned so hot. They were never as different as the rivalry made them seem. Looking back, Rory does not deserve the label of someone who was weak or naive. He cared deeply about the history of his sport, and he was willing to put his own name and friendships on the line to defend it. That kind of loyalty is rare in professional sports, and it says something good about him. His mistake was not caring too much. His mistake was trusting an institution to protect him the same way he was protecting it. Greg Norman saw that gap coming from a mile away, and he tried to warn Rory long before the deal ever became public. Nobody wanted to listen to the loud, bitter disruptor at the time. Looking back now, it is hard not to wish someone had. Maybe the next time a quiet warning sounds bitter and selfish, golf fans should pause before they decide who has the full picture.